or something you've been working all day, or?
What we were told, that's what happened. The state trooper called and said, yeah, they did preliminary testing and that there was no drug.
About 814-09, this is an ordinance amending Chapter 505 of the Amherst Codified Ordinances regarding animals and fowl. And this time I'm actually going to take attendance first. Beginning with Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Janik? Here. Mr. Van Truren?
Here.
Mr. Bukovac?
Here.
Mr. Goodell?
Here.
Swasil? And I am here. All members of the administration are present. Thank you. Alrighty. And with that, once again, we're revisiting from last week's meeting. Do we need to make any motions or anything like that? Or I know we've got a letter from Mr. Bukovac who'd like to make a few suggestions since we last visited. But if we're free to move forward, let's see what Mr. Bukovac has to say, please.
Well, thank you, Chairperson. I sent an email out to everybody on a couple of points, and also I think it's been copied here for us this evening. Two things that I brought up previously was actually the number of fowl and also the acreage. And some of the concerns we had about acreage was the time allowed to discuss and actually implement something. One of my concerns in making more additional restrictions on any of our residents, especially those who are not potentially, I don't want to say bad neighbors, but in the Ward 1, we have some lots of significant size. We also know that we have a lot of people in Ward 1 that have multiple animals, and we also know we have multiple fowl, multiple other types of animals that we don't need to bring attention to. One of my concerns is that the legislation that we're proposing is also going to install restrictions on these individuals where there hasn't been an issue. I think we probably all can agree that legislation only needs to be written when we're trying to solve a problem, and there's not been a problem at all, from what I understand, in these areas. So I would like to propose that whatever number of fowl that we actually define here in this legislation, that we use a multiplier to saying that if we decide on 4 chickens being permitted within the restrictions that we have outlined, that would be for any lots under 1 acre, and then subsequent acreage would be then multiplied by the number of acres that they had. There's one solution. The other solution that would be a potential, I believe, is making this legislation being only applicable to those lots under 1 acre. My other concern with the number of fowl that we had, current ordinance in 505-12A states that no poultry younger than 4 weeks of age may be sold, given away, or otherwise distributed to any person in lots of less than 6. So we already have something in the books that would say we have to, any kind of fowl has to be 6, and we're talking about 4. So to me that sounds like a contradiction. You can buy 6, but you got to get rid of 2. Or you have to buy 6 and you have to get rid of 2. So those are my 2 points that I had in the email. I'm really concerned about the acreage. Again, I want to protect those good residents and good citizens, and especially in Ward 1 who have large acreage that are not being problem citizens. Thank you.
All right, real quickly here, if I can just summarize, what you're suggesting is 6 feet a minimum for 1 acre and under, and then it's a multiplier for each acre beyond that?
Yes, that could, the number being consistency with previous current ordinances, and yes, for the multiplier would be my recommendation as well.
Okay, and before I turn it over to council, I'd like to just ask the law director, as we learned last week, sometimes good intentions have, they impact things. Do you see any issues with this before we continue?
No, in fact, in retrospect, the only reason the number 4 came into play is because the outbuildings use the house these types of animals indicated 4, but there's some other issues pertaining to the number of outbuildings you have, etc. And I think just to make things simple, I think it makes sense to go with the 6 number, particularly because the not only is 505-12 required to sell at 6, but I believe it's also mandated by at the state level as well. And I think that our zoning board would probably be thankful if we have an acre or less, a certain number, an acre to 2 acres, a number, and it's multiplied thereafter, because otherwise we might have some variance issues where they'll be tasked with evaluating how many chickens someone should have on their property. I think if you just have something black and white, something simple, often the clearer and less complicated things are, the better government runs, and perhaps you ought to consider that. So I see nothing wrong with doing that, particularly since we kind of segregated fowl from the other types of animals being housed. I think you can do that, and it actually will be clear. And I think 6 is not an unreasonable number of chickens for an acre or less. And then Mr. Brookback, 12 for 2 to 3, however you would suggest, that would certainly be appropriate. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Law Director. Okay, and with that, turn it over to council. Questions with regards to the language that's in the ordinance and the suggested amendment. We'll start with Mr. Mitra.
Sure, I do think it's a great idea to allow more depending upon the acreage. Larger areas obviously would allow people to more responsibly have larger numbers of fowl. I don't have a problem with that. I have a question really quick about 505.12. So that tells residents how many fowl they're allowed to give away or sell. How is it constitutional for us to tell people whether they can give someone a chick?
I think it's batches of 12. I think that's what they're thinking, batches of 12. And of course, quite frankly, it's a very good point. I think what was happening is also, it might be also in the, you can't color your chicks either mode. So what people were doing, they were giving away colored chicks, I think, one at a time, etc. So I think they said, fine, if you're going to be doing this, and you do batches of 12 or batches of 6. So I think there might be, and I don't have it with me. I was in trial all day, but the state may mandate a 6 number as well for some reason. I'm not sure why that would be the case. Mr. Miller shaking his head.
It does to the age, and part of it has to do with the age because the chicks do not, it actually does, but I can pull that up for you, but under the age, it has to do with an age thing with the chicks. If the chicks are older than that, they can be bought and sold with a lesser quantity.
Right. And it might have to do with sex of the birds as well. I mean, you can't really sex a chick until they're older, I think. So.
That is, if you don't mind me interjecting, that was the reason why they are able to be sold in batches of less than 6, and it is an age thing because they want to be able to tell whether they are male or female. So most people who are owning hens will wait until the distributor can identify whether they are a hen or a rooster. And once they get to that point, they'll sell you 1.
Right.
And they'll sell you 50.
That makes sense then.
So this to me is kind of goes towards our ordinance of tying up horses in town. I really don't think that this is something that's applicable as much anymore. And if I can just add to the 6 or 4, I would have no problem amending this 505.12 to say 4. To keep it consistent, like you said, keeping it simple probably would help, and just have 4 across the board under 1 acre. So I definitely believe that you have to, those acre lots or more were here before, I'm sure, even this ordinance was written. And so I kind of want to stick with the fact that they've had that responsibility and they've handled it well. And that was the expectation. When you moved in, you knew somebody had an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres. If they have chickens, fine. But I believe what we're trying to do here is really reach a common agreement as to in the city, and I'm going to call it in the city, in the smaller lots.
One second, Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. Are we still answering Mr. Vincent's question?
Yes,
Okay.
about 4 or 6. I think that's where 4 or 6 number gets to be a problem. I believe that 4 or 6 becomes a problem when you start looking at smaller lots. So I wouldn't say let's go up to 6. I would say in smaller lots, let's stay consistent with cats, dogs, and other animals and keep it at 4. 4 across the board. And then after that, any acre or more, you guys can throw out some options.
Mr. Ventron, does that help?
I think Mr. Miller makes an excellent point. I think it's been 4, it's on the books as 4 now. I don't think there's been a problem with that. And I think rather than upping the number allowed to 6, that changing 505.12 so that it brings it down to 4. Frankly, I think this is a silly, so it's silly to include this in the first place about how many you can give away, but I guess I understand the intent. But I agree, I think I'd support leaving it at 4 and then larger amounts by multiples depending upon the acreage. And that's all I have.
Okay. Mr. Law Director, is there any, because you just talked about 6, now we're at 4, I'm sorry, if you just...
Well, maybe I wasn't clear about what we have on the books already. What we have on the books is that it says that your outbuildings can hold up to 4 each. And it says your when I say outbuilding, your buildings that are accessory buildings to your primary structure talks about up to 4 animals in that particular structure. What I don't want there to be is some sort of confusion. Does that really mean 12? Because you can have 3 accessory buildings in your backyard. That can be interpreted that way, I suppose. So that's why we changed it a bit. I actually changed it to 4 specifically in the in the poultry fowl provision of 505.13. I left the other animals alone. And then I added, there shall not be, in no time shall the resident owner possess more than 4 members of the fowl family. So I kind of nipped the, anyone's interpretation of the accessory building to your primary building, your home, but it really doesn't solve the problem. I mean,
Then, now that we're looking at this, 505.12 is more on sale. Sale would be commercial. You have to get a variance to sell anything in private R1. I believe if you're selling anything out of your house, you have to have a variance. Is that correct? Mr. Costello, would they have to have a variance to sell chickens out of a private?
There's some exceptions for agriculture.
Is agriculture the exception?
you're talking about home businesses.
Right, home business.
I mean, nothing, if that was the case, then you can't have garage sales and sell.
Well, we went through that already.
Yeah.
I know.
So, look,
So would we need
and
to...
I guess I didn't want to pull out the big issue of, the number of accessory buildings you could have and how you could interpret, the number of chickens or dogs or cats per accessory building, but since we're talking about it, you might as well get it out in the front. The way it's written now, it says you can't have more than 4 dogs, cats, domesticated animals, or fowl in your kennel, which is an accessory building. Well, what tells us how many kennels you could have? You could have 3 accessory buildings in your backyard. Can you have 3 kennels? I imagine that someone who's creative enough could argue that. So that's why I changed it, and under the new 505.13, subsection 4, fowl coop, talks about the accessory building, and it says no one shall have more than 4 members of the fowl family on their property. All right? That kind of fixes the problem, but then are we treating people who have dogs differently than people who have fowl? Probably. Does it make sense that you could have 4 large dogs on your property, but actually 5 or 6 large dogs on your property if you think about it, but only 4 little chickens? I don't know. I mean, that's... You can do it either way. The way I wrote it, you could do it either way. You could do 4 and then multipliers thereafter. You can do 6 or multipliers thereafter.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Silver?
Because I'm not going to say so much.
I don't like the way this is, the suggestion of this creeping up again. You said that, Mr. Law Director, your interpretation was you're allowed to have 4 of any kind of animal, and that's the existing situation. I'm willing to accept that, but this stuff, when we're creeping up, now we got 6, now we got 18, now we got 24, I just, I'd say leave it the way you have modified it. You've modified it so that, there's been compromise on both sides of this issue. And I say that all this is going to do is going to cause further debate for possibly several more meetings, and this isn't going to get resolved this summer. And I think we need to leave well enough alone, just leave it the way it is. And if we want to put anything else in here, then we deal with it separately legislatively in the fall. It sounds like you feel that this is in harmony with regulations elsewhere that exist, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
And I move that to take this to the floor of council.
The legislation as written?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Janik?
I would just like to consider the point that some of
You
the...
have-
we need a
You have to
second.
either second. You can't have a discussion without a second.
Mr. Ventura?
I'll second with discussion and questions, because there are a few more things that I want to clarify.
Okay. So the motion is to take this to the floor of council. And with that, please continue, Mr. Ventura.
So if we were to take this to the floor of council without some sort of clarification on the number of fowl that are allowed for lots that are larger than 1 acre, would that limit them to also having 4, or would they be able to pursue a variance from?
Mr. Ventura, and you're right, good question. It says unless a variance is granted, and no time shall a resident owner possess more than 4 members of the fowl family. So if you do have a lot that's larger than the standard lot, you can ask for a variance. In fact, it doesn't tell you, it doesn't say it has to be an acre or more. It could be someone who has a half acre. I imagine there's people in town that have a half acre outside of town.
Okay.
That might get a variance because it just makes sense.
Well, I want to just be a little bit more comfortable and maybe talk just for a minute about the likelihood that variances would be granted. And I know that there are people here who have experience. And I just don't know if I'm comfortable with limiting someone who has, say, 5 acres to having 4 fowl. So if we can discuss that, I'd appreciate it. And I'll step back.
Please continue if anyone would like to comment on Mr. Ventura's question. I think it'd be great. Mr. Costello?
I've been on the zoning board of appeals, and I actually went through the process of changing it to more of a court system. There's 7 pieces of criteria in order to get a variance. A couple of those, and one probably most important, you have to show that there's no other use of the property other than receiving this variance. It's going to be pretty hard to prove in some sort of court setting that you can't use your property without more than 4 chickens. I mean, I really think there's, according to the law, and the way I think our law department would see it, pretty impossible to prove you need more chickens with a variance. So I don't see much, in my opinion, I don't see much chance of a variance getting granted.
Well, I guess it would depend on if it's a use variance or like an area variance.
But I don't see anything, you know, in my opinion, and I would...
You're right, since there's no area criteria here, it would be more of a use, probably, and it would be difficult. I think it would be difficult.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I have 2 issues with that. First of all, I don't feel it's fair to kick the can down to the BZA and have them have to visit this with about 25 different variances. I also don't like the idea that owners and people with those lot sizes need to now go pay a fee to and come and spend their time, their money in front of that Board of Zoning Appeals to hope that they're feeling in the mood and that there's this criteria set. And, you know, I agree with Mr. Costello that he and others have set up a system that's really pretty legally sound. It's just that I don't think that's fair. So I'm not going to support kicking that down the can. The first thing. The second thing that I have issue with is that with this written the way it's written, we have to prove that damage, in my opinion, we have to prove that damage or that problems are going to occur by allowing more than 4 chickens on an acre, or 2 acres, or 3 acres. And I would rather give that property owner that right and allow them to be responsible, good citizens here in Amherst, good neighbors, and then prove that they can't handle that. Then we have systems set up in 505 that will, has provided misdemeanors and such punishments for not being good neighbors, for noxious smells and what have you. So noise ordinances and such. So I have a problem restricting and then saying, well, we'll come back to it another time, or we'll let the BZA fix it. So I will not be supporting it as is, and I think that this needs to be amended. I think that there's some of this that Mr. Vukovac, our councilman in his ward, will see often, and I think these adjustments need to be made here. I don't think we should jump on the, let's just get something done and then figure it out down the road. Let's do it right.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. I'd like to turn it over to Council President and then...
All right, we've kicked this thing around, and I agree with Jennifer on one point, that we've got a good ordinance here. Let's pass it. 4 chickens is enough on a residential lot within the city. I agree with Mr. Vukovac as far as if you have more acreage, you should be allowed more chickens. I agree with that totally. I also think that we need to stick with the permit fee, and I think the permit renewal needs to be done every year. If you have an individual who is not living up to being responsible for his chickens, then they ought to be taken away from him. And the other thing is the police department and the building department know then who has chickens and who doesn't have chickens. And I agree with Mr. Vukovac totally. If you have more acreage, you should be allowed to have more chickens. If you've got that much acreage, you're not going to be basically in the city hardly. You're going to be on the outskirts anyway. So, and if you're responsible, the chickens aren't going to be a problem. The people are. So, that's all I'm going to tell you. But I think we need to amend this with the acreage. But I agree with Ms. Vasilk that 4 chickens is plenty inside the city limits, unless you have a larger lot. And also, I don't care if you got 50 coops in the backyard, you're only allowed 4 fowl. So it doesn't make any difference how many coops you have, you're still only allowed 4 fowl, or outbuildings, or whatever you want to call them. I mean, I can have 5 outbuildings and 1 chicken coop. Can I have 4 chickens in each? No, I don't think so. It says 4. So, and I think we're beating this thing to death. I think if you want to amend it, let's not amend this to add to it, and let's move it on to council. Let's quit fooling around here. We're going to nitpick this thing to death.
Okay, and I have 3 hands up. I'm sorry. Before I talk about President Dietrich, it was Janik, Ventura, and Vukovac, and we'll go in that order, please.
I don't believe you can currently purchase chickens in a 4 batch. I think it, like places like TSC, it has to be 6. So if someone who is wanting to purchase chickens for the first time, what do? Do they go out and find someone else that wants to buy the other 2? That's the point of clarification.
I believe when FFA was here, they said that you can do mail order for less than 6. In addition to that, you can go in with a buddy and purchase 6. And if you have an observation, real quickly.
Do any of you guys ever have chickens? You have to buy them in 6, and there's a chance that they could die. So if you get your 4 and 2 of them die, guess what? 2 chickens or 1 chicken? That's not enough. They're pack animals. And you guys are fighting like it's the end of the world to limit it down to 4, like there's any big difference. Every single time I went to speak, I talked about the decibel level, the noise level, the smell level, everything like that. And it seems like I wasted my breath if it continues to go like this.
Okay. So Mr. Janik is accurate. You can only purchase in groups of 6.
He's right.
Thank you. And with that, was there anything else, Mr. Janik?
No.
Okay, Mr. Ventura.
Can it be made a little bit more clear about the motion to send this as it is on the floor of council, and what we need to do in order to implement more lenient rules for more chickens for higher lot sizes? Would we vote that motion down and then amend current legislation as it's presented to allow more chickens based on?
My understanding is that if you keep your second, we'd have to vote on it, if it doesn't go through, the floor is still open unless we recess. We can always bring something back up, correct me if I'm wrong. You keep your second, it goes to a vote. It's either passed or fails.
Could you clarify on
Well,
your
correct me if I'm wrong, we can amend, even though we have a second, we can add to this and amend it.
We've done that before.
Yeah, you can.
Yes, we've done that before.
As long as it's not the third, I mean.
Yeah.
But, we can,
So we can send this on and amend it in first reading.
right.
So sending it on now would not keep us from adding rules that allow people with higher acreage to, okay, understood. That's all.
Mr. Bukovac?
Thank you. I'm not going to beat the 4-6 to death, but I will make a couple of the statements. I'd like to, just so we're clear, we do not have a limit of 4 dogs per household in this house. We do not have a limit of 4 cats per household. We have a limit of 4 dogs per enclosed kennel. My house can have 8 St. Bernards if we wanted to, and you guys can't, nobody can say anything about it unless I'm a nuisance to society, or I'm going to have a smelly backyard, I'm not taking care of my animals. There's not that restriction on the number of animals, with the exception of we're putting a restriction on the number of fowl per household. I still do believe that number of 6 is a good number for a couple of reasons. One is, I think the biggest fear of having chickens in Amherst is that they have chickens, not that they have 4 chickens or 10 chickens or 15 chickens. We're worried about having chickens. In a situation where a dog is in a house or in a backyard, the dog roams free, we are telling these chickens they have to stay in a maximum of 144 square foot area. We're limiting the number of area. The pens have already have a defined size. Why do we care how many chickens are in that defined size, as long as at the maximum of 4 per square foot? All right, but 1 per 4 square feet as defined. That is my take on the 6 chickens. I think it's more of a fear of what the implications and connotations of a class, of when the neighbor's got a chicken. Again, we're trying to legislate for problems. The problem has existed that we've had chickens in the city. We don't know how to deal with it. We've had 2 cases and we're on a panic. I think 6 is a good number. As far as the acreage, I may support going to the 4 accounts without acreage considerations, but I will not support it being passed without consideration for those people in Ward 1, which I've been talking about since October. We've got to protect those people. If we're only going to have 4 chickens, I will only support that they are not restricted after 2 acres, or after 1 acre at all, because I think being able to put 12 chickens on a 3-acre lot is probably getting ridiculous. I don't think it's for me to actually say how many is a good number of chickens on a large lot. I'm not a farmer. I'm not in those people's situation, and I do not think it's fair to citizens of Amherst who have been good citizens to be restricting them and creating laws when it's really not necessary. So that's my feeling on the 2 items. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Mr. Bukovac. Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Bukovac makes some good points. I would like to clarify that the number of dogs or cats you have is not limited if you keep them in your house. You want to let them out in the backyard, run free, great. But if you're going to shelter them, kennel them, that's where the number, now per kennel,
Now and always, per kennels.
per kennel, per shelter. I think shelter as well. It says in here, per kennel or shelter, there's 4.
Right.
So if you want to kennel or you want to put your chickens in your house, then I could see that same parallel. But I think what we're trying to do is get some consistency for how many animals we're going to allow in an outbuilding in the city limits under an acre. I think that's really the heart of it. After that, then more acreage, more chickens, that's to be debated. That can be brought up and amended. I do want to make sure we get a clarification and point of order on some factual information that's been tossed around here. You can buy chickens in less than 6. So this hang-up of, oh, I can't buy them, so I need to be able to have them, is not accurate. The second thing is well, what if some die? If you buy them from TSA, you're going to get 6 chicks that could either be hens or they could be roosters. Now you've got roosters and you're not in compliance. What are they going to do to the roosters? Let them go, slaughter them themselves, take them in, trade them out, go to the fair, I mean, so I think that for us to use that, you can only buy that commerce thing. I promise you, if TSA in our city here knows that we are going to have this mass flux of urban farming, and that we only are going to be able to purchase 4, they will find a way to package them in 4. I promise you, they will not lose out on sale based on how they package it. So for us to say, well, because TSA sells it this way, it should be this number, I'm unwilling to accept that rationale. So in the city lot, 4 chickens, in outhouses, 4 dogs in outhouses, kennels, 4 cats, 4 animals. Keep it consistent, keep it simple. Outside of an acre, you can own more. You can kennel more, you can shelter more. Let's take care of the issue of neighbors on top of neighbors and chickens, the issue with the chickens. Why not clean up the rest of it while we were at it? I thought that's what we were attempting to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Miller.
it.
Mr. Ramsey?
I just wanted to, this has nothing to do with really the number of chickens you folks are debating about permitting or not permitting, excuse me. However, I'm just reading, and I would make a suggestion to some of the language. If you look on page 6, you're defining a term called fowl coop. And really what that means for you is that if you look at number 5C, it's going to put a restriction. If you operate or you have a foul coop, and then it's going to dictate the way you need to clean it. When I read it, reading paragraph 4, foul coop means any structure or premises used as an accessory use to a principal dwelling located in an area zoned R1 or non-conforming use in which 4 members of the fowl family are housed or kept for pets. If I'm representing somebody that's charged with violating this section and they happen to have 3 chickens in that coop, I'm going to argue that they don't fall within this restriction. So I would suggest that if you folks want to make it the requirement to clean under sanitary conditions under C, that you may want to have it in which any members of the fowl family are housed or kept for pets. And then likewise, the second point I was going to make is in that paragraph C, I would use the phrase fowl coop instead of the phrase coops or enclosures used to house fowl. You'll see that you've done it in D, fowl coop. So those are the suggestions I would make just based on being a lawyer for 10 years. And that's that.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. All right, so we've got a motion, we've got a second, and I'm just going to espouse my little 2 cents worth here. 1987, a group of council members sat down and looked at chicken ordinances and farming and stuff like that, and they came up with laws that we're now debating again. We got one chance. I don't want to have people come back to me in 10 years and say, your rules say you got to buy at least 6 and you're still only allowing 4. Why didn't you fix that? I wouldn't have an honest answer for them. I would be embarrassed to say I had an opportunity and I didn't. So with that, I would like to see it move to 6. And once again, this is committee. We espouse our opinions. And that's what I'm sharing with you right now. I would like to see it move to 6. I also am a big proponent of giving people the opportunity to make mistakes. They prove to be good neighbors out there in the larger lots. Why are we imposing anything other than thank you for paying your taxes and being good neighbors? I don't want to beat these people up, and I want to give them the opportunity to continue being good neighbors. That's my 2 cents worth. Thank you. And with that, we'll take a vote. Once again, if I'm not mistaken, I'll repeat what I believe the motion to be, and that is we take the legislation as written to the floor of council. With that, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Ventura?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
No.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Ms. Wasilka?
Yes.
And I'm going to vote no also, but it does pass 5-2. Mr. Miller?
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Goodell?
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
Yes.
And it is so noted. 6-1. Thank you. We're adjourned at 7:07.
I wasn't done. So now.
Third meeting of Amherst City Council will come to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Janik?
Here.
Mr. Bukovac?
Here.
Mr. Goodell?
Here.
Mr. Van Kuren? Here. Mrs. Vasilk? Here.
We'll stand for the prayer by Chaplain Vasilk and remain standing for the pledge of the flag by Sergeant at Arms Bukovac.
Will you bow with me, please? Gracious God, bless this meeting tonight. Bless all who are assembled here and bless their thoughts and their words. Keep us always on the path of righteousness, and now may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Move on to item 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the regular council meeting held June 9th, 2014. Minutes of the Building and Lands Committee meeting held June 16th, 2014.
Mr. Miller.
Make a motion to accept minutes as read.
Mr. Van Kuren.
Second.
Motion second on the floor to accept the consent agenda as read. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kuren?
Yes.
Mrs. Vasilk?
Yes.
Consent agenda is accepted. Move on to item 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on tonight's agenda. Anyone wishing to speak on anything that is on tonight's agenda? If not, we'll move on to item 6, ordinances and resolutions, first reading. Item A.
An ordinance amending Chapter 505 of Amherst Codified Ordinances, Animals and Fowl.
Mr. Winarski.
I'd like to make a motion to introduce 2 amendments to the legislation. One being that up to 6 chickens are allowed for 1 acre of property or less. And that the second amendment is that 6 additional chickens be allowed for each additional acre up to 5.
Thank you. Mr. Van Kuren?
Point of order, those are 2 different amendments. I plan on voting yes.
We'll vote on them separately.
Okay, all right. I'll second that.
Thank
But
you.
he said 6 additional for each. He said 6 additional for each acre. So if it's 4, then it would be 4 additional.
Well, the First Amendment is for change it from 4 to 6. So if that doesn't pass,
Okay, second is multiples.
right,
Then I'll second.
thank you.
Do I need to rephrase my motion?
Yeah,
Okay. My first motion is to make it 6 chickens per acre for the first acre, and then a multiple for each, they can add the multiple of that for each additional acre up to 5 acres.
okay. Does everybody understand that? You have to have an acre of ground to have 6 chickens. That's the way I read it.
What?
Mr. Pecora.
Well, just this a point of clarification, I don't know if, what Mr. Winarski had indicated in the previous meeting, in the committee meeting, was that an acre or less, it would be 6 chickens, correct, Mr. Winarski?
Correct.
Because
Okay,
what
you said acre or
Mr.
more.
Dietrich just said.
I'm sorry, up to the first acre on a property.
Okay, let's clarify this. So, what you're saying is that you would like up to 6 chickens allowed up to 1 acre of ground.
Correct.
And then after that, 6 for each additional acre.
Correct, up to 5 when it becomes farming.
Yes, okay. Are we clear on that?
We are, but first we're going to vote on how many are allowed up to an acre.
Right, we'll vote on each
Okay.
amendment separately.
Another second on the clarification?
I'm fine.
Mr. Van
No,
Kuren?
I'm not gonna worry about
All
that,
right.
just so we understand it. Okay. We'll vote on the First Amendment, which would allow 6 chickens under 1 acre of ground.
Discussion?
Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to accept everything that we have debated, and although we had changes in the committee, we're going with exactly how this legislation reads, except for an amendment, 2 amendments. And that's to change the number for under an acre to 6, and over an acre, a 6 for every acre after that, is that correct?
Multiples.
For multiples?
Multiples.
6 based on each acre.
Mr. Winarski?
That's correct. Those are the amendments I'm recommending. I'm not saying anyone else, but I can't recommend more additional.
I understand. I understand. Anyone else? Ms. Vasil?
I will not support this because we have worked for 6 months to come up with compromises and to basically make a change at the 11th hour back to basically what we what we didn't agree on. I just won't support it.
Clarify which of those,
The chickens, the number of
the
chickens.
number or the acreage?
The number of chickens per acre. I think that this is going to allow you to have 6 chickens on a city lot, and eventually we reached a compromise based on the rulings made by the law director that we could have, we're allowing 4, and I agreed to that, and I was one of the 0 people, and suddenly now we're just ramping it up. It's going to be 6, then it's going to be 12, then it's going to be 18, then it's going to be 24. I mean, that's what it is. We've gone up to 24 now, where people weren't not allowed to have any unless they had a variance. So I'm not going to support it. I think Mr. Pecora did a good job of coming up with the compromise legislation after we waited 6 months, and like I said, to make a change at the 11th hour, I will not support it. That's the end of my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Winarski?
I'd like to defer to the law director, or actually request the law director's opinion with regards to the number of chickens that the state requires. We may have, well, if the state says something about this.
Yeah, I mean, I only because I felt bad I didn't have the Ohio Revised Code provision on hand earlier. It's kind of a mixture of everyone's comments. For chickens that are less than 4 weeks old, no poultry may be sold or given away or otherwise distributed to any person in lots of less than 6. So it's not that you can simply, no matter what, buy less than 6. It's just that if they're less than 4 weeks old, you have to buy them in lots of 6 pursuant to the Ohio Revised Code, section 92562. And that, like I'd indicated, I was jogging my memory, it also pertains to the possession or the selling of died animals and things of that nature. So the Ohio Revised Code provision does require there to be, the chickens to be sold, or poultry to be sold in lots of 6 if the poultry are less than 4 weeks old. So that's something I wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to agree with Councilwoman Wasilk on this. And if lots of 6 under 4 weeks, you're not going to know the sex of them. We can't have roosters in here. You have to know what you're buying. You have to buy 4 hens, 6 hens, or whatever we establish. I have no problem with having soon-to-be domestic owners of their pets, chickens, to wait 4 weeks or more to find out the sex of the chick, whether it's a rooster or a hen, and then buy them in quantities of 4. I believe that I'd have been willing, I think, Ms. Wasilk, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we would have been willing to say 4 under an acre and over an acre, we can go in increments. I think that would have gone through. I've really struggled with this, and I just have so many people coming to me who want nothing to do with chickens, and I have so many who are coming to me who say they do. And I like to stay consistent. I want to stay consistent with dogs in kennels, cats in kennels, alpacas, pot-bellied pigs, and anything else that you want to put out in that kennel. And I say keep it simple, like Mr. Pecora. You go 4 across the board. After an acre, it's big enough to you to have a farming or urban farming type atmosphere. and then you can have more. But I think this was a good compromise. I would agree with Mr. Silk on the compromise for under an acre, and I agree with Mr. Bukovac and Mr. Winarski that after an acre, we need to allow for larger numbers.
Is that it, Mr.?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Mr. Bukovac?
Thank you. I think everybody knows my feelings on this. It's really not about a number, it's about a class. People don't want chickens. During this whole period, for those who really didn't want chickens and say there was a compromise, once there was a determination that 4 chickens are legally allowed in the city of Amherst, I did not see one proposal or legislation for banning of chickens in town. There has never been a compromise because 4 is the legal amount. I am just suggesting 6 for lots of reasons, which is fine if you guys don't want to worry about that, but I'm also really, again, stressing the fact that we have chickens in town. We've only had really one problem, and to penalize everybody else is kind of foolish, especially those with large acreage, and which reside in my ward. I'm here to protect those citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Bancher?
I also agree with Councilwoman Wasilk about the limit at 4. I think it's important now, with all due respect, to clarify something that she did say, which I think is a big misconception with residents. All of us up here have gotten phone calls from people, I think, on both sides of the aisle, and usually they're one of 2 types of people. They either want people to be allowed to have 0 chickens or to be able to have as many as they want. And if you aren't with them 100% on one of those 2 situations, then, well, they're not going to support you anymore. We have compromised up here, but it's important to remember that we were always allowed to have 4 in the city, and the law director has established that. And Mrs. Wasilk had said it went from 0 to 4 to 6. I think we really need to clarify for the public that people have always had the right to have 4 chickens in the city. We're not giving the right to people to have chickens in the city right now when they didn't have it before. And I think that really needs to be clarified because there's a lot of misconceptions from residents. We are not giving people the right to have chickens when they didn't have the right to have it before. And I just wanted to make sure that was clarified for the public. That's all.
Thank you. Okay. If no one else has anything, then we'll vote on the First Amendment. Less than 6 chickens per, up to 6 chickens per acre of land within the city. In other words, you're allowed to go from 4 to 6 chickens, basically.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. On a city lot. So, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
No.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
No.
Mr. Van Churen?
No.
Mrs. Wasilk?
No.
Okay, motion fails. 4 to 3. So we'll move on to the next item, which is multiple chickens on over 1 acre of ground. In other words, 6 chickens per acre. In other words, if you have over
Before multiples of up to 5 acres.
up to 5 acres. In other words, if you have 5 acres, you can have 30 chickens or 20 chickens, basically. So,
No, it'd be 4, up to 5 would be 16 chickens.
if you have 5 acres, you're allowed 4.
That's farming at that point.
Well, if you have 5 acres, you're under the definition of farming. I can imagine you can have as many chickens as you want.
Well, that's true, yes. Ms. Vasil?
I just want to say that I support the idea of a graduated number, and certainly if you've got an acre or more, I mean, you can have more chickens. So I will be supporting that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, this will be an amendment to the existing ordinance for whatever you said. To allow multiple chickens as far as acreage goes, 1 acre or over. Is that what I'm hearing, Mr. Law Director?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Dietrich. So for any acreage of an acre or more, it's multiple of 4.
Okay.
So I think the max before you get to farming is 16. So for 1 acre and below is 4. Scratch that, actually, 20, you're right, it's 20.
Yeah.
So an acre below is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, so. It'd be even.
Mr. Buchbeck?
Yeah, I just want to be clear that the amendment is going to not state an actual number, but just as a multiplier of the preconceived number, predetermined number. It's not going to say you're allowed to have 4 per acre, it's going to have a multiple of acreage to the allowed amount.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. 2 acreage, okay. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes?
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Motion carries. So now we'll have a vote on item A as amended. So is anyone going to make a motion? Ms. Vasil.
I move that we take item A as amended to the second reading.
Thank you. Mr. Goodell.
Second.
Motion is second on the floor to take item A to the second reading as amended. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
No.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. That completes first reading. Item 6, we'll move on to item 7. Ordinances and resolutions, second reading. Item A.
An ordinance amending and restating Amherst Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1341, unsafe and insanitary structures.
Ms. Vasil.
Move that we send this item to the third reading.
Mr. Miller.
Second, please.
Motion is second on the floor to send item A under the third reading. Are there any comments? Roll call vote.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Bukovac?
Yes?
Mr. Goodell?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yeah.
Mrs. Wasilk?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. That completes item 7. Move on to item 8, ordinances and resolutions, third reading. There are none. Move on to item 9, miscellaneous acknowledgement of the public. Anyone here wishing to speak on any item? Sue. Yes.
That's you, Bob. I hope you were looking right by me. I was just kidding. Turn it on?
It's on.
All right, thanks.
Doesn't work, don't worry about it.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't work.
Thanks, Dave, Janet, for at least assembling, and Mr. Dietrich and Mayor Taylor for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Community Task Force. I'm here to speak as a citizen for the task force. Just to bring you up to speed on what we've been working on since, let's see, it was October of 2013. There was a flurry of Facebook postings that went out when there was 20-some heroin incidents that were caused in Lorraine County, one of which was an Amherst resident, Alex Rodriguez, who passed away because of the heroin overdose. And after reading all of the Facebook posts, there was a group of us that got together and thought, well, let's assemble
who would be interested in just trying to head up a task force for the community? You know, just bringing along the citizens of Amherst, not just any one group. Not one group is going to solve this problem. The schools alone aren't going to solve the problem. The police officers aren't going to solve the problem. We needed everybody to come alongside each other, people who had experience, that had children that were brought up in good homes, that we found were doing good, but they got hooked up in the prescription drugs and marijuana that was mind altering, that ended up taking them down the road to heroin that ended up killing them. Now, from what we're finding out, other than what we formed in 2013, there was probably 10 to 30 people that got together to talk. It has now gone to about, I don't know, there's probably 15 of us that get together regularly. We thought that it would be best if we can get together at Amherst establishments throughout Amherst, Ziggy's, Corks and Stovies, any restaurant, just to get together, meet once a month, have it open to the public, and ask questions. Bring people. This is a grassroots situation for the community. Bring in ideas. Not just have a group of people talking amongst ourselves. I'm just a dad. My wife Sherry and I are just a dad of 3 boys. I wanted to get involved. A couple of people asked, "Why are you getting involved? Your kids seem to be doing well." Well, you know what? I didn't want the wool to be pulled over my eyes. In this day and age, my kids could be doing drugs right in my house, and I don't even know the signs of it. And I wanted to go out and meet people that went through this. Jim and Kathy Luce, they've been through this. They come out publicly and speak. That takes courage to do that. And they're going out and speaking to a bunch of different groups that I have a pamphlet here, and they're sharing their story. I'm sure it was embarrassing for them to do that, but they're out trying to help people. You know, what signs did they learn when they were going through it? So I want to learn that. I want to see what's going on with my sons. If they're not, great. Their friends come over, I want to be involved with their friends. I want to know what their friends are doing. Sherry and I, we want to get to know their friends. We want to be able to, if something's going on different, and be able to reach out to them. They come to us maybe if they can't get to a parent. Maybe their relationship with their parents aren't good or strong, where they can go and say, "Hey, I'm having problems with this issue. I need to talk to you about it." I'm finding out there's a lot of kids out there that can't even talk to their parents. So maybe there's a buffer. Maybe they come to us. We'll eventually get to their parents. We're going to tell them. We're not going to not tell them. But come to us. And it's not just us. We need the community to come alongside everybody, because I can only touch this group. Mr. Winarski, he's working with 1,400 kids in the baseball program. Mayor Taylor, so it's been a while since he coached me when I was 8 years old, but he's out. Everybody's got somebody they could reach out and touch. It's not just one. It's got to be a community affair. So for somebody to think it's just a school issue, that's wrong. We're fooling ourselves. If it's just a police issue, the police need help. So that's it. I just wanted to share my heart on that. What's the mission of the group? We just want to get out. We want to be able to reach out to the people that are having problems with addiction. And it's not only the kids. We're finding out as we're meeting and going to different functions, there's 30, 40-year-old adult kids that are living with their parents that are getting hooked up with their drugs in grandma's house. And they get hooked, then they take the next step, and then they're hooked on heroin or whatever else is bad that's out there. So when I spoke at a church had asked us to speak, we spoke from the pulpit right from their service. A bunch of older people came up and asked, I didn't even realize that we had this many prescriptions in our medicine cabinet. What do we do with those? Well, Darren Connolly was there speaking with me at the time, and he said he tried this. His father-in-law was sick of cancer. He had since died. He went over and he dumped 75 bottles of painkillers on the counter, bagged them up, went down to the police department at 11 o'clock at night, dumped it in their pill box, and the lady at the dispatcher asked, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm just dropping off my drugs." Kind of laughed, joked about it, but he dropped them off. You may have seen it on Facebook. And no questions asked. You drop the drugs off there, and you leave. You just dispense them. The coroner at one of our symposiums said, don't just dump them in the toilet. You know, I don't know if our utilities department can handle all those drugs going into the, we'd be getting sick that way, but there's opportunities to get rid of drugs, and Amherst is great. On the board for the task force, Mark Coffin's on the board, he's the secretary. He's a real proponent of helping out. There's 7 of us on the board. We've formally committed a task force board, and there's more that support. There's grandparents that come. There's all walks of life. There's young, there's some kids that come. There's kids we're trying to get more involved with that come to the meetings, so peers can touch peers. You know, adults can help adults. Let's see, some of the goals we're working on. We want a long-term goal or framework to address at-risk behaviors of social issues in our neighborhoods. 1, networking with kids. How do we reach those kids? The more we get out and talk, how do we get to the kids? I mean, we're older, adults can't talk to the kids a lot, but I know Mr. Corey's kids well. I try to go out there and throw the ball at them a little bit to establish a relationship. Hopefully one day they say, hey, I got a friend of mine who's doing something that hopefully they don't, but hopefully they have enough confidence to come to me and say, hey, what do we do? This kid's in some trouble. How do we get to the little kids that are in 1st or 3rd grade as a preventative before they get in trouble? We don't know. We're trying to figure that all out. We need help from everybody to try to get those answers. I'm not a counselor. I'm just a construction guy. I'm a dad that loves people and kids, and I want to do the right thing to help people. So as we're meeting people, we're hearing counselors, we're hearing legal people are starting to come to the meeting. Those are the kind of people that we need to just keep networking with. And then there's grandmas and grandpas that are coming. What can we do? My kids are gone, but they can reach people as well. Setting up small groups. What we're trying to do right now, right we're in the middle of, we're using Jim and Kathy Luce and maybe a couple other people. It's going to be like trainer. They're going to let us know what they've learned through their trials. Let us know how to talk to people. What are the hot buttons? What do you say? I'll go into a house with, maybe somebody won't come into an open environment like this, but they'll invite us in. There'll be maybe 5, 10 people that they know that maybe might be a little embarrassed, but they'll do it in their house. We can go in and talk. They can ask questions, and then maybe we can help on a quiet, and they're not in the open. So it's trainer kind of thing there. A couple committee structures that we have right now are educational, provide public education opportunities in home education. There's a committee group, Darren and Todd Waltz are working on that along with others. Just gathering, Darren Conley is involved with, who's a principal in the area, and he's in the school system, so he's working with the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio is, I guess, trying to help provide some funding, if I'm correct. I don't know what opportunity, but he's working with the state of Ohio to get us some funding to keep going. There's church organizations, the committee. Twice a month on the church, we try to reach out to, I think there's 20 churches in Amherst that I found out. I'm a part of the church committee, so I know a little bit more on this. Twice a month on Saturdays, we meet. The people that just, if they feel comfortable with that, and this committee, they come and they pray specifically for people that are broken. It doesn't have to be just drugs, alcohol. They'll pray for each other, people that are hurting. And twice a month at one church, then we go to another church. And it's great that I think we've been to Catholic churches, Baptist, Pentecostal, every church around here that I haven't been in. I lived here all my life. And what's neat about that is the walls aren't being built that this is our way of worshiping or doing things our way. It's between the Lord and what's going on with the addictions that are in the public, and people are praying specifically for those items. So that's a group of people that are comfortable doing that in the committee, so they're focused on that. Now, with that said, there's coming up in fall activities. We're trying to do kickoff and outreach groups for, some of us heard of 5th quarter after football games gather at some place, a non-threatening facility, where the kids could go after a football game. Football games are over 9:30, 10 o'clock. Some of them don't want to go home, but there's nowhere to go. Potentially get in trouble if you go to somebody's house. Maybe the parents are helping and providing stuff they're not supposed to. It's not everybody. Just some people get it, some people don't. So we're looking for venues. We're looking for, that'd be great if Central School, I was talking to Mr. Diedrich last time I was here about a month ago, if we could turn it into some kind of community center where kids can hang out, you know. I talked to Jason Hawk, he said, you know, we were doing skate parks. Those seem to come and go in fads. Those are things that have been happening. But we need to be thinking about something that the kids would like to do, something fun, something non-threatening. And I'm not saying go there and play Christian music all night. Some kids aren't going to like that. But play some non-threatening music, some good music. Have the Amherst police said that we could work with them somehow, so they could patrol the outside of the environment, so there's nothing going on in the parking lot. And just that way it'll establish some networking with the police officers and the kids, and they become friends to an extent where they know that they can count on each other, they can help each other, and they're not just an enemy to the kids always out trying to get them. The police don't want that, they want to help the kids. Just a couple other things, and I've used my 5 minutes. Public relationship and marketing to help spread the word and advertisement. We're looking for opportunities. We've gone out and made little bracelets for Amherst Task Force. This one actually says education, prevention, and recovery. You know, maybe kids 1st through 5th grade would like wearing these. I don't know who would like wearing them, but we got a couple hundred of these. We'll pass out at we're selling them for $2, but there may be an event where at Amherst baseball game, maybe we talk to Chuck, see if he's willing to, maybe we just stick a stack there and some kids wear them around. It opens a conversation. We were talking about making some stickers to put on pizza boxes to get out to the community with just little notes to say where the Amherst Police Department has drug for drugs, or little just subtle comments that just keep it out in the public where people can be coming up with ideas, be thinking, how can we help each other? We're in this together. Heroin typically happens between 18 and 22 years old from what I'm hearing. So as they're younger ages, they're getting into the prescription drugs, then into the marijuana, the gateway drugs, and then it gets into the harder stuff after they leave home. So we're trying to do the prevention, but on the other hand too, there's areas of opportunity where you guys can read this afterward where there can be help as well. There's one more item, if you don't mind, where we did speak at the church is right down the street from the high school. A guy came up after we spoke, he said the Port Authority in Lorraine sold us this one house in Lorraine for $1, and what they do, it's a food outreach. They bring food in, but they have a room there they want to give us, just after speaking with them, to say, here's a room set up. Now we fed them, now let's feed them with some information on how can you get better if you're sick. If you're not sick, how can you stay healthy? So please be thinking out of the box for us, and it's just not for us. It's not about me, it's not about the people on the task force. It's about where we live and how can we help the kids and adults that are hurting. So thank you again for asking me to represent the community, and I appreciate the time.
Mr. Kukuka, you have a question for me?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I want to echo Mr. Kenricar's comments. This is my job. I do this every day. I work for a company called Ameritox, and we do urine drug monitoring of opioid pain patients. But we've also expanded our profile to monitor for other medications, benzodiazepines, ADHD medications, and I call on physicians. I call on pain management physicians, family, internal med, OBGYNs, palliative care. I work with Stein Palliative Care over in Sandusky. It's amazing the horror stories they talk about. How kids move back home, they're addicted to heroin, they take the parents' pain medications and go sell them, and the pain patient who needs his pain medication is taking heroin just to get over his own pain. Prescription drug overdoses are outpacing car deaths right now. It's a major, major problem. If you don't think it is, it is. There's pill parties, they call them Skittle parties, M&M parties. Each kid brings their own prescription drug, they pour them in a bowl, and they just take whatever's available. It's amazing how many kids can identify a Vicodin, an Opana, an oxycodone, pill. Even I can't. It's crazy. My son broke his collarbone. His orthopedic surgeon gave him 40 Vicodin. He didn't take one. He was fine, but we got 40 Vicodin for nothing. It's a major, major problem. And unfortunately, I call on these physicians. Some of them are like, the state doesn't mandate me to test. I'm not going to test my patients because they're going to think I'm thinking that they're drug addicts. I'm like, no, it's to help them against themselves so that they're not diverting, eluding, or getting addicted, or selling them. It's to help you and your license to make sure that the patient is following their prescribing habits. A lot of people say, marijuana should be legalized. Our company has a retired DEA agent, and I'll give this one little story. He tells a story about a DEA agent in Colorado that he's still friends with. He contacted him, and he was telling him about how this one store owner had two Mexican cartel gentlemen come into his store. They said, we would like you to buy your marijuana from us. He said, no, I grow it my own. It's natural here, I cultivate it, has no pesticides. They said, okay, that's fine. And as they started to leave the store, they walked by and put an envelope on the counter and they walked out. And the store owner walked over, picked up the counter, opened it up, and it was a picture of his two children getting on their school bus. This DEA agent, the retired one that works for us, he has bought heroin from a pastor in his own parking lot of his church. He's bought cocaine off of 12-year-olds. It's not going away. And I appreciate this task force, and I will be coming.
If I could get a business card from you.
Absolutely.
After your talk, and just one story you brought up too. And it's going to be, there's hours that of the day where it's not convenient. Just this past week, I'm trying to help somebody, and I had to do a little research myself. So I drove through a ghetto part of Elyria, trying to find this one person. And I pulled up to this one house, and there's a group of kids, bonfire, and I walked up, and they asked me, they had anything, what do you want? Do you want anything? Do you want a beer? Sit down. I sat down with them, I was talking with them, I was just trying to get some information on another house, and trying to find somebody. I didn't stay long. I got my information, I moved on, and made contact with the Elyria police, with a friend that I knew, and it went on from there. I won't go into a lot of detail what happened, but I hope that story turns out good, but it's not all 3 o'clock in the afternoon when you find stuff. Sometimes you're going to get a call and you got to go out and do it. And if you're not willing to do that, maybe somebody you're networking in is. And something you got to watch at arm's length too. If it's a female, I'm grabbing my wife and going. I'm not going myself or somebody else. You can't just take that chance either. So please, let's just think out of the box. That's why we talk, but I would have never known without speaking today. So thanks for the outreach for this. Mr. Taylor, thanks for having me speak here, and everybody else, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Bob, it would be nice if you'd come back periodically to let us know how things are going.
I will.
When address council.
Thank you.
And I think it's good to impress upon parents that if they know their child is doing this, don't think that there's a stigma on them.
That's the thing, too.
You know.
You don't want to sit through some of the bosses and got quoted in the paper the other day, but that's true. You want to help the kids.
Yeah.
You want to help them. The cops don't always want to get them in trouble either. There's certain times that what I was told by Mr. Cawthon is, we don't want to arrest them all the time. We want to help them. And that's what we're about. We want to help them, get them on the straight and narrow. And if they keep doing it, then there's consequences to that. But the first few that you help, and then they'll be talking to each other and saying, hey, you know what? I didn't get busted. I didn't get in trouble. They helped me. And that's going to go like wildfire too. So I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. And feel free to, like I said, come back anytime.
Thank you very much.
So, yes,
I'm sorry, could I ask you a question real quick?
sure.
I would just like to ask anyone...
Can you go to the podium,
Okay,
sir?
sorry. This is my first meeting. I'm a rookie.
We're all rookies.
Anyway, something that's come to our hearts.
What's your name and address, sir?
Okay, my name's Ted Bledsoe.
Thank you.
8454 Overland Road. That's on their address. It's Amherst Township.
Thank you.
Okay. Something that's come to the hearts, I'm also part of the Amherst Community Task Force. Something that's come to our hearts as we've met is if we had some sort of center here in Amherst, somewhere where people in Amherst can get together, the hurting people, whether they're addicted or families of addicted, or we would like to put together some sort of center here in Amherst. And I would just like to ask anyone here if anybody's heard of a property that can be donated, or know somebody who can donate property, or any type of space that we could use for that particular outreach. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you.
We appreciate that. Thanks.
Anyone else? That completes item 9. We'll move on to item 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
I have no agenda requests, Mr. President.
Okay. Finance, Ms. Purcell?
Yes, I'd like to call A14-32, resolution for estimated resources for the 2015 budget. With the emergency, this is the projected budget requested by Mr. Kukuka for the county estimating purposes. I'd like to call that for the 14th of July at 7 p.m. and before the council meeting, and the hearing that has to follow for 7:15 p.m. on the same day before council.
So it's a public hearing, Ms. Purcell?
Yes, yes, sir.
At 7:15?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And that completes my items for finance.
Thank you. Building and Lands, Mr. Panowski?
Nothing at this time, Mr. President.
Thank you. Streets, Mr. Bukovac?
There are no items for streets, please cancel.
Thank you. Community Development, Mr. Janik?
No items, please cancel, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Executive, Mr. Goodell?
Nothing at this time, Mr. President, please cancel.
Thank you. Ordinance, Mr. Miller?
No items, Mr. Chairman, please cancel.
Utilities, Mr. Miller?
No items there as well, please cancel.
Thank you. Recycle, Mr. Janik?
No items, Mr. Chair, please cancel.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Bukovac?
Technology Committee has no items, please cancel.
Thank you. Police and Fire, Mr. Van Kuren?
Cancel, please.
Annexation, Mr. Bukovac?
Annexation has no items, please cancel.
Thank you. That completes item 10. Move on to item 11, reports administration.
Mr. Ramsey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No report.
Mr. Kukuka?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The state auditors should be finishing up their audit of the city. We will be having our exit audit meeting on Wednesday, the 25th, with the auditors. And the estimated resource budget, again, I think you either have a pack or will be getting a pack. Again, that is for the county. It's our forecast for next year. If you do see under the general fund, it will have a negative number. And as I've been told by Mark Stewart and Craig Snodgrass both, that's what you want, and able to get money from the county. End of report. Thank you.
Mr. Pecora? No report, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Costello?
Thank you. Real quick, the movie company that's producing the movie The Bronze is going to start filming in town starting the 29th through the end of July. They've done a good job keeping their footprint as small as possible with as few inconveniences, but there are going to be some street closures, as many as probably a half a dozen, with I think one day, probably a full day closure, but the police will be on hand. We've worked real close with them. We'll make sure everything's done safely. If you have any questions, I'm sure the movie company can be contacted. Thank you. End of report.
I just have one item. During the last storm we had, we lost shoulder 4 up at the park. It's been completely demolished. The insurance adjusters have come in and we have a $5,000 deductible, but it will be covered by insurance and we'll rebuild it as soon as possible. End of report, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Bukovac?
Make a motion to accept the reports of administration.
Mr. Miller?
Second, please.
There's a motion and a second on the floor to accept reports of administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Reports are accepted. Mr. Miller?
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Bukovac?
Second, please.
Motion and a second on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at 8:07. 17.
Yeah, I think that's